You are seen. You are worthy. You are not alone. The world loses one person to suicide every 40 seconds. Let's change the stats. Together, we can say not suicide. Not today.
From a career that spans decades, which includes some shows like Deadline Crime, The Today Show, and MSNBC. But then you go on to become a successful talk show host. But then out of all of that, there was one talent that still remained, and that was becoming a best-selling author. Join me as I talk to two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, talk show host, and author Tamron Hall on this episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People.
Welcome to True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People, the podcast where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction, and reminding you that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. Here is your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People. Of course, I'm your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already, make sure you follow us on all of our social media. One link to a link tree will get you every place you need to go pertaining to the show. All right, as always, I'd like to remind you, if you are someone in trouble, you think about hurting yourself or someone else, please call 988, text or call. No matter what the problem is, it's not worth your life. And if no one's told you today, let me be the first to tell you I do care and we do need you here. All right, so if you look at your calendar, you know it is Author Day, and I have a good one for you. I've been waiting on this one for a while, so I hope you guys are excited as I am. Let me introduce to you who our guest is. She is a two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist and author. She is the executive producer and host of the nationally syndicated talk show Tamron Hall. Tamron Hall is currently the second longest-running Disney-produced syndicated talk show, and it continues to be one of television's highest-rated daytime shows. Her extensive resume also includes hosting Deadline Crime with Tamron Hall on Investigation Discovery, Today, and MSNBC Live with Tamron Hall. She received the 2015 Edward R. Murrow Award for her segment on domestic violence as part of Today's Shine a Light series. An outspoken advocate for shedding light on domestic abuse, she has partnered with Safe Horizon to launch the Tamron Renata Fund in honor of her sister to help victims and families affected by domestic violence. She is the two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, talk show host, and the author of Watch Where They Hide. Please welcome the incredible Tamron Hall. Tamron, thank you for joining me today.
David, it's so good to be here to talk with you.
Honor and pleasure is all of mine. Happy you could make it. Before we start, let me ask you, is there anything else that we should know about Tamron Hall that we don't already?
Oh, I hope there's a lot that you don't already know, because Tamron Hall is an actual human being who, like you, as I'm at my home right now with my bird chirping in the background and my dog trying to get in the room and my kid about to come home from pre-K. And I hope there's a lot that you don't know. And that's not because I'm hiding anything. It's simply because all of our lives are rich and complex, and some of it private, even when you live your life in the public eye, as I'm lucky enough to do.
Well, you know, you are a big figure when it comes to true crime. I have followed you. I've been a big fan of yours for a long period of time. And I always say that those of us that are the most passionate about true crime, we've been touched by it in some frame, form, or another. For you, unfortunately, was the murder of your sister, Renata. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I've spoken about it in the past. The reason that I even revealed, honestly, David, my sister's story, I just moved to New York, and it was like 2008, I guess. And I was randomly asked to host an event in New York. When you are a part of a big machine, for example, like the Today Show or anywhere, even when I was in local news, you're lucky enough to get invitations. People want your name to help promote their event, to help fundraise for wonderful causes. And I was new to town, single, living in my apartment. And the PR person from the Today Show came and said, there's an organization called Day One, and it's meant to help young people learn healthy dating habits, that love doesn't have to be crazy, that it doesn't have to be violent, that someone repeatedly calling you is not a sign of love. That's a sign of disrespecting your boundaries, and all of these healthy dating things that you want to instill early in life. And hopefully they stick with that person throughout their journey, their dating journey. I said, okay, great. It's at the Bowery Hotel, this really cool, hip hotel in New York. And let me go and start to build relationships in networking in New York. I arrived to host an MC. And again, I think someone canceled and I ended up getting asked to do it because I was not well known at that time. I just moved here. And the part of the event included young women coming to the stage and sharing how day one helped them and how day one empowered them to share their stories. And one after the other, David, each young woman told how they had survived just unimaginable abuse. And I've been a journalist for, 30 years. Of course, I covered stories and I've been at the scene of horrific things that can happen and murder, suicides. I've been exposed to all of that over my career. But this was the first time I was in a room with so many young women who had survived abuse and really graphic, I can't even tell you just how traumatic it is to hear a 13-year-old describe being beaten by her boyfriend with a vacuum cleaner hose, an older boyfriend that she thought had taken her in because he loved her, and she's in the hospital fighting for her life. So each one told their story. And we have a saying where I'm from, the South, fair exchange, no robbery. And that means if you're sitting with someone like we are and you're telling about your life, that they too are sharing something about their lives. That you're just not, they're not your therapist. It's a conversation. Just like you said, you set up your show. It's a conversation. We're talking to each other. And I got to the night, at the end of the night, and I was preparing to give the end remarks. And finally I said, I feel like I am robbing you all who are here because these young ladies are so brave and they've shared their stories. I've not shared that my sister's death is an unsolved crime. We don't know who is responsible. No one was ever charged. But what we did know as a family is that she had endured abuse at the hands of a partner, and that one night, I was living in Chicago, had witnessed this abuse and didn't know how to handle it. I thought the right thing to do was to tell her, you've got to get out of this relationship. You've got to get out. You're better than him. You're better than this. And when she didn't listen, it created a divide in our relationship, one that caused us not to speak for about a month or so. And I was fortunate that we, through my father's urging, started to rekindle our relationship and our bond. And she died soon after. And I shared that story, and that set off a journey of supporting survivors of domestic abuse and supporting those who are willing to have the conversation out loud.
Well, I'm glad that you've done that in the foundation. Let you know a little bit about me. I am a survivor of domestic abuse, both from a parent, who being my father, and an ex. And as you know, men don't often talk about this. It's the whole machismo thing, especially in the African-American, Mexican, communities. I've made it my mission this year to go around and to tell my story. For that reason, is to help other men come out of that. And maybe they say, well, if this guy who runs this podcast can do this, then I can come out too and maybe get some healing. So I do thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. The work we do, when I tell people I help survivors of domestic violence, that's everyone. And that is an important message to your credit, that you are able to share not only the childhood trauma, but the challenge and the trauma as an adult who has survived domestic violence, and what that means, and why you've decided to use your platform and to honestly use your story. David, I was really nervous about sharing. As things went on, I would share my sister's story more and more. And then I think I read an article that said, Tamron Hall's sister died or something, but her name wasn't there. And I really started to ramp up my advocacy work and used her name out loud because I didn't want her identified as Tamron Hall's sister who died. I wanted her to be known as Renata, and that's why we started the fund. My nephew has appeared on my show for Domestic Violence Awareness Month because that trauma he still lives with. Now he's a father, and when his child asks what happened to my grandmom, he has to relive that pain and then also explain why his son doesn't have a grandmom to share all of these memories with. So it is, it hits all of us, and in many ways, it impacts all of us in many ways. And I think that the part of the conversation from the perspective of a male survivor is sorely missing in a lot of the dialogue. And I'm happy that you're doing that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Coming from you, that means a lot. But just to let you know, from those of us that sit outside of the TV cameras, maybe not having such a big name, it does make you more humanized. And that was the one thing years ago when, I started watching you, I resonated with that because of the fact I'm like, okay, well, she knows, even though if she hasn't been touched by it directly, she has indirectly, and you've seen all this in your crime work. So it really does humanize you a lot. And I thank you a lot for that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, you've had an incredible career that is still going strong today. I know a lot about it, but in case the audience don't, can you tell us how you got started?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I got started actually in Philadelphia, believe it or not. I went to Temple University, and my first job was at a cable company doing camera work for lacrosse, field hockey, all kinds of sports. Joe Frazier and his manager helped me get a job at Wade Cablevision at the time it was called. And I started out doing like just errand work in TV. I knew I wanted to be a journalist, but I also knew I had to get my foot in the door. And my first on-air experience, funny enough, was recording the commercial to remind people to pay their cable bill. So somewhere that tape exists of me saying, please make sure you pay your cable bill by calling 1-800, da-da-da-da-da. I wasn't acting. I thought I was reporting. I was trying to handle it like I was a reporter on the street, letting you know how to pay your cable bill. But my first big experience reporting came in Dallas, Fort Worth. I reported for 4 years there and then moved on to Chicago for 10 years, where I reported as a general assignment reporter, as a crime reporter, and then moved into the anchor chair, which led me to MSNBC, where I covered politics, and the Today Show, where I became the first Black woman to weekday host the Today Show. And now I've had my own talk show, the Tamron Hall Show, for 5 seasons and counting. And that's kind of the career. It's gone fast in some ways, and then other days it's gone slow as hell. It depends on the perspective, but it's all been a remarkable journey that's led me to, after creating the talk show and finally allowing that show to breathe and settle in, I was lying in bed in the pandemic, like so many others, thinking, what do I want to do next? And because I have covered so many different cases, whether it's Deadline Crime, which I hosted for 6 seasons, or Someone They Knew, I hosted for 2 seasons, I've learned a lot about, this world of crime reporting and what it's like being a considered successful crime reporter. And I wanted to write it from this fiction perspective. I didn't want, to tell my life journey specifically. And so Jordan Manning was born, this character inspired by my life as a reporter, specifically as a crime reporter, but someone very different from myself who finds the power and finds her purpose in not only reporting these crimes, but also finding a way to solve the crimes as she sees failures within the newsroom and also within the law enforcement community.
Now, as the first African-American Black woman to ever be a co-anchor on the Today Show, you wore a very special jacket that day. It was Lena Horne's. She still inspires you today. What does Lena Horne mean to you?
Oh, you know what? It's just, I grew up in Texas, in rural Texas. And so I never imagined, I don't know, that I would be living in New York City. But all of these images of excellence and achievement were either out of New York, Chicago, or LA, And so for me, Lena Horne growing up was just always there. Her music, her incredible ability to navigate challenges, but do that with grace and style. And I just always enjoyed it. So they had an auction here after she passed away of her possessions. And I was lucky enough to get a jacket, a beautiful Kaftan that she owned. And I wore it when I signed that contract. She just really represents a level of ambition, but not being blind, not feeling the need to steamroll over people, but also being a unique creature. And it's hard, as you have your successful podcast. There are going to be 5,000 reasons that people say you should change something.
Mm-hmm.
But staying authentic to who you are and recognizing what very special weapons, if you will, that we bring, not leaning out of that. And she didn't. She had a very different voice. She had a very different presentation and had to deal with some days, white producers and white movie executives not wanting her in. And at the same time, Black people saying she act white. She's always juggling, pleasing one side or displeasing one side or the other, but finding her way to be this historic, legendary person.
Now, you've had some illustrious guests on your show. How does it feel to have the second longest running syndicated show that Disney's ever produced?
That's crazy. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's so hard to believe when you think about all of the other shows that have come and gone. And, I always tell people shows don't make it for various reasons. It's not because the person isn't great. It's not because the show wasn't great. There's just a wide range of things that I could list and would bore you to death on why a show struggles and ultimately is taken off. We were very fortunate in that people knew me as a journalist, but the expectations were low. It's like, wait a minute, she's not a comedian. She's not an international star. She's a journalist, and I like her and she's great. And I like that Deadline crime show she did, or I liked her on the Today Show, but wait a minute, a talk show. So I love being the underdog, right? It's like when you can sneak in as the underdog and you make it work. And here we are, a show that is still seen as the underdog, even after 5 seasons and 2 Emmys. I enjoy that space. I tell my team, you want to live like a queen and a king, but fight like a junkyard dog. And that's what we do. We are scrappy and we fight for the big gets. We fight for the big guests. We fight for our TAM fam. I tell my team all the time, when we have a live audience 3 days a week, and I say, I hope we make you proud. I hope when you watch our show, you laugh with us, you cry with us, you learn with us. And you feel the spirit of this underdog kid from Luling, Texas, who's not the type to give up.
Well, I hope you know what you're doing to inspire, especially the young African-American girls. I know a lot about your career. I do know, you got booted at one point because of Megyn Kelly. Everybody else would have given up at that time, right? But you came back, you kept going, and you are where you are. And your show is very enlightening. You just don't have guests on to have guests on. I always feel like you have the guest on that means something, that you want to get a point across and to teach something. So your show is incredible. And I hope it's on for longer past this. I know you're signed up through this year, but I hope it goes on further than that.
Listen, I'm 53. I wanted to go on, but you're not going to see me wheeling out there. You can forget that, David. And that's why, honestly, that's why I wanted to write the book and get, to start to find other things that bring me joy. The show, I believe, will last as long as I want it to. We have found a formula that works. You can never run out of good stories to tell. We have a lot of celebrities that come on, but we always say, listen, if you're going to come on the show, we want you to talk. I don't want you to come on and just plug your book or plug your movie and roll out. People want conversation. That's why your podcast is so popular. That's why podcasts in general, you get a breather and you get to soak in. I used to use The Rock as the example. It's like anyone can have him on, let him plug his film, but we want to know about this kid who defied the odds. I remember interviewing The Rock in Tampa when they were like, he's about to go on his own and there's no way. And when he was the people's eyebrow rock, people want to know the layers to the story. And that doesn't mean just pain and trial and tribulations, but we all, I think, either looked at a movie or watched TV and said, I think I can do that, or I want to do that. And having that connective tissue and that connective conversation all built on dreams, right? Because that's what it is about. It's just about, I dreamt I could do it. I thought I could do it. And we can find inspiration, and we can also find a lot less divisive things to focus on when we focus on some of those things that we share, which, for example, the ability to dream and want something out of your life.
Now, before we transition and talk about your wonderful books, I do have one more question that I said if I ever got to meet you, I would ask. So in 2008, you interviewed Barack Obama before he announced he was running for president. You got a one-on-one with him.
Yes.
What was that like?
Wow. It was not as nerve-wracking as you might think because no one thought he was going to be president. This was the Audacity of Hope book tour. I was a reporter in Chicago, preparing to leave, right? We just announced that I was going to go to MSNBC. And at the time, MSNBC wasn't even political. The big story the day I moved there was Britney Spears shaved her head. I mean, they were still doing that kind of thing. And I, through the luck of the draw, got then Senator Obama to agree to the interview, and he was promoting the book, and the big book was, his story and his father. And there was great speculation that he was preparing to run for president. And, like every politician, when we asked, he was very coy with it. But I was, I remember even seeing him some years prior. There's a big parade in Chicago called the Bud Billiken Parade. It's like the kickoff for school. It's this mythical, I'd never heard of it. I grew up in Texas. It's this mythical creature that kicks kids off to school. It's like, I don't know, it's the weirdest thing, but it's there. And he was at the parade. Everyone goes to that parade, and people, saw him as this very charismatic person. And there he was telling this life story. And then a blink of an eye, they were off and running. And it was, I have to tell you, people often ask me the most intimidating or, the most intimidating, Winnie Mandela. I mean, like the Barack Obama interview was nothing because we didn't know he was going to be president. No one thought. You don't know. I interviewed Winnie Mandela, and it was like being in the room where the air literally stopped. It was just, when people have survived the unimaginable and the weight of dark and the finding of light it was just, it's crazy.
And the thing with that too is, we always hone in, I guess, on the man, Nelson Mandela, the things he went through, but we never look at the women that's behind that. And Winnie's a very powerful and strong Black woman.
Oh my gosh. And the same, honestly, with Michelle Obama. I actually met Michelle Obama before I met Barack Obama. We told this story on my talk show, funny enough, and she burst out laughing. We were in Chicago, and I remember first seeing her at this big charity event, and she's very tall and striking, and everyone was talking about her. And he was a state senator at the time. Some years later, or he'd run for the state senate at the time, and then some years later, I was at another gala, another charity event, and David, the stage was a white, like you'd Saturday Night Fever with the lights that come from under the stage. And I had on white pants. And I'm like, wait a minute, the lights are going to shine through my pants. Oh my gosh. And there was a woman standing, I didn't realize it was Michelle Obama at the time. I go to her and I said, I'm hosting this. We were the only two people in the ballroom because they let us in. And I said, can I go on that stage? And I'm going to turn around, and can you see if you see through my pants? And she said on my show, see, I had your back then, I got your back now. I'm like, oh my gosh. So there is my story. But yeah, I met her first. But to your point, so often the important role of whether it's a mother or a partner or even a sister, is lost when we are telling, as history likes to show, the greatness of man and not the greatness of the woman that is nearby.
So out of all of this incredibleness of your career, 2 Emmys, journalistic career, talk shows, you turn around and you became an author.
Can you believe it?
Man, you have a lot of hats. Got a lot of hats. So Watch Where They Hide is actually your second book in the Jordan Manning series. The first one is titled As the Wicked Watch, which is released October 26th of 2021. It is a bestseller. Now I have to ask you how much, I think you may have already answered this, but we'll go over it again. How much of Jordan Manning is in you?
Oh my gosh. So I would say Jordan Manning is about half, So she is in her 30s, starting out in Chicago. Originally, she wanted to study and be a forensic scientist, but life pointed her in the direction of this TV career that she thought was appealing and got pulled into it as a reporter. And like me, she gets great satisfaction out of reporting and the power of that microphone and how it can be used for good or evil, to be quite honest with you. But unlike me, she is pulled into wanting to right the wrongs that she sees in front of her. The first book, As the Wicked Watch, was inspired by the disappearance and murder of two young kids that I covered, one in Dallas, Fort Worth area, and one in Chicago the same year, 1997. And I watched how my colleagues and the stations I work for covered these so different. You have one girl who happened to be white, another who happened to be black, and this lens of who gets to be the lead. And when I was writing that book, David, it was 2019. This is the pandemic. We're all looking for, one new thing to do with our lives because we didn't know what life we were going to have. And I was like, I really want to write this. No, I think I fell asleep watching ESPN because Jordan Manning is Michael Jordan, Peyton Manning hybrid name. I truly think I fell asleep like everyone else watching that Chicago Bulls thing that they did on ESPN, which was brilliant. And so I started to write about, this case of young Black girls missing and Jordan being pulled into the disappearance and the frustration of how it was covered in the media, how her colleagues were seeing it and wanting justice for these girls. When the book was published, the Gabby Petito case was happening. And I started to get, a Daily Show with Trevor Noah, all these people wanting to talk with me about why does the media keep getting this wrong and what happens. And I said at the time, listen, Gabby Petito's family deserves to get the justice that any parent would want. But what we know is this is a conversation that won't ever be resolved. You will always have a powerful person in the newsroom who says more people are going to care about this story because of this person. And I think it may even be subconscious, but it exists and it continues to exist of who gets to be the leads. The book happened to, right in the middle of this conversation of Gabby's case, come out. I started soon after writing the second book, Watch Where They Hide. And it was inspired or is inspired by two cases, again, that I covered. And for me, David, the process of creating Jordan Manning's world has to be, for me, for it to ring authentic, come from some of the things that I know intimately, some of the experiences I've had intimately as a crime reporter, not just as an observer of how it plays out. So this second, Watch Where They Hide, came from just the heart and the pain that I felt covering two specific disappearances, one in Michigan and one in Oklahoma. And so now we find Jordan Manning, this character, being pulled into this disappearance of a mother of two, a family begging for Jordan to help. And she is now, unlike me, willing to compromise her career to find justice.
Well, I know it's not out yet. It comes out in March, but the book is a page turner.
Oh, that means the world to me. Are you kidding me? Thank you.
No, it was, it's one of those things where I was like, all right, your PR team says, here's the arc of the book. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start this at lunch and I'm going to put it down and go back to work in half an hour because I take half an hour to eat, half an hour to read. And I looked at my clock and I was like 10 minutes past my lunch break. And I'm like, this book. Now, I have to admit, I have not read yet As the Wicked Watch.
That's okay.
It was funny because my wife was like, I said, yeah, Tamron Hall's coming on the show. She's now promoting her second book. And I never told her the name of the first one. And she called and she goes, hey, I think I just found Tamron's book. Is this it? And so she says, I'll pick this up for you. So I do have it right here in paperback. And if this is anything, I'm sure that it's a bestseller. I was like, I looked at my wife and says, I can't put this book down.
Oh,
it is that page-turning. You can feel it, what you're writing, even though it's based on cases. You can feel your personal growth and or your personal things in that. I can feel a little bit of your sister.
Yeah.
Maybe the
Yeah.
case may go unresolved. Page turner. So I have to ask, you have one bestseller on your hand. Do you think this one's going to be a bestseller?
Well, if you keep telling people that you love it, it will, because you're a high bar. And I have to tell you, for me, it was it was exhilarating. It was, nerve wracking to write that first book, and under the circumstances that we were all living under, of course, locked in. I did not study other writers like you. I love to read in my bookshop. I've run out of room for all the books that I keep in my home. But I was inspired by, the Nancy Drew novels that I used to keep under my bed as a kid, or Agatha Christie, and, those page turners. And I wanted to create a character that you would root for, that you'd be mad at, that you'd wonder, what is she thinking? But also see yourself in that journey, that what would I do, right? If someone called you now and said, David, you have this big platform. I need your help. I need you to get in the trenches. You're like, wait a minute. I got 30 minutes to eat lunch. I've got to get my pocket. Now I got to save the world, right? And she's pulled in to this world of wanting to find justice. And the great part of writing a fiction novel is that I can then play with things. And I keep saying to my husband, like the last page, because what's going on in your sick mind? I'm like, I love it. It's just, I wanted people to feel their heart racing and to root for Jordan to come to a conclusion, but also wonder about what life is like. You just told me you don't even take enough time to eat lunch. So that tells me about your work ethic already, a strong work ethic. And it's trying to balance family and balance dreams and goals. And so through Jordan, I think what is most like me and most inspired by my real life is this. She's in her 30s. She's single, and she's wondering, am I working too hard? Am I putting work ahead of family? Am I putting work ahead of, finding that right person? Am I putting work ahead of my health? I mean, there's a couple of times she's fallen asleep with a red wine on the side of the bed and using it as a self-soothing thing to deal with some of the stress of the job. And so it was a fascinating book to write, especially at the end when I realized, and I did not realize this, David, that I'm Shelley. More than I am Jordan in this book, I am Shelley. I'm the sister who is looking for an answer to what happened to her own sister, a sister that she was close with, a sister that had experienced a strained relationship with her. And when I was writing this character and that part of the story, it was not, my sister Renata was not front of mind. But I don't think any type of trauma, as you've even talked about in your own life, it's never far. It's never far.
You totally feel it. I'm not going to give it all away because I need people to go buy this book. But it's when Jordan goes into, I believe, is the coffee shop, and she's already been told that, Shelley's called a whole bunch of times. So Shelley decides, hey, I'm just going to show up and grab her by the arm. I'm like, you can totally feel, even if Renata wasn't in the front of mind, you feel that. So I just want to let you know, as a reader, if you know your story, you totally can feel that you've wrapped that in that, even if it wasn't intentional.
It wasn't intentional. I wanted a way into this case. We see, and people ask me, do you have to read the first one to read the second? You don't. I really wanted, David, for her to tackle a case each book, and that you would be able to pick up this second book and very easily still know her, right? She's still developing. She's someone that it's almost like hearing about a friend of a friend and then finally meeting them. You already feel like you know them. So with this second book, I wanted you to feel like I already know her. You don't have to go back and read the first book. I want you to, don't get me wrong. I love it, but they're each self-contained because they are each inspired by real cases that I've covered. And Jordan, is the through line. And through Jordan, you get to see these things in life.
Well, I'm glad you wrote it like that, because the fact that all that did for me, after I read like the first 5 minutes of the book, I'm like, I got to go back and read As the Wicked Watch, because if this is this good, let's go read the book that is actually carrying the bestseller title.
You're blowing me away with this. I mean, I'm telling you, I launched in, and that's something that I hope, in addition to people reading the book and hopefully enjoying it, that they also, through conversations like the one we're having, understand that I'm 53 years old. I took a leap of faith with just trying something new. And I know there are constructs to writing thrillers, and there are guides and this, and that's great. But sometimes you just got to get on the field, and you got to, lose that self-conscious thing or that self-doubt and do something unexpected. Do something that makes you feel the tingles, right, of life. And that's what this did for me. And I hope when people hear that I wrote the first one, almost 50 years old, never wrote a novel in my life, never really thought about what that would look like. And then I jumped in, and now saying, okay, we've done it once. Let's see if we can do it again. That's the tingles, right? You want those tingles in life, whether it's starting your podcast, whatever it is, you want those tingles of trying something new.
So let me ask a question that I'm sure all your readers want to know. Mm-hmm. Why did it take a little over 2 years for the second book to come out?
Honestly, I was focused on a couple of things. I have some TV projects that I'm producing. I've just finished a cookbook. I have a kid, and I shoot 5 shows a week. 3 of them are live. And 3 of the shows are live. I write every show with my amazing team. I read every research packet with every, team member. And I wanted to really hear the feedback from the first one and sit with it and figure out this juicy story. I wanted it to feel more of a page turner. The first, I love the first book. I'm so proud of it. It's a slow burn. It is really meant for those people who are able to sit down and soak it in. This book, I wanted it to be more, the heartbeat. I look at everything through a rhythm, and I even tell my son, who has great rhythm at 5, it's like a beat. And so the first book is like a pop, 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 but then it picks up pop, 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 pop. I wanted this to pop, pop, pop from the beginning. I wanted you to feel like out of breath by the time you read the last pages of Watch Where They Hide. And I needed to find that beat. I've not experienced writer's block. And I think, again, David, it's because these are all inspired by real life experiences. I journal, and I've kept a diary pretty much since 3rd grade. So I like to stay in that moment. So I think that's why.
So I've asked other authors this. I want to ask you this same question because I want your take on it. Mm-hmm. Out of all the authors that I have interviewed, they've all told me that their characters are living beings that take up rent in their mind. Sometimes they even go to sleep with them. They shower with them. I had one author tell me, I was trying to sleep and I could not sleep until I got up and wrote this chapter on this character. Does it work like that for you as well?
Oh, yes. Jordan has helped me especially process a lot of the true crime nightmares that I still have. I have sat across from murderers. I've been in the room with people who are about to be executed. I've been in the room with mothers who've killed their children. Stuff that I know, and many nights wish I didn't know. And so through Jordan, I'm able to be a much more active participant in solving the crimes and getting out there and facing down some of this evil that I wasn't able to, as the journalist that I am, face down. So she definitely lives in, and I wanted her to have action. And in the first book, she gets into rough and tumble. I wanted her to be like a kick-ass, to be quite honest with you. And so I live with that, and she lives with me in that way, because I can, through her, deal with it is shocking what one human can do to another. And it is shocking the reasons why that people can just cause such destruction. And it's not just the individual whose life is ended. It's, everyone left around. One of the cases that inspired this was a part of my last season of Deadline Crime. I was pregnant with my son, and I'm in the audio booth, and I was getting ready to do the voiceover for this case of a woman who was murdered in this dark, dark forest all alone. And she was pregnant. And the serial killer, who he was later identified as a serial killer who ended her life, he didn't know that at that time he was ending 2 lives. And I'm sitting in this audio booth, David, and I'm reading, and I was like, I cannot do this. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, you'll probably bleep it out. I was like, I cannot do this shit. I mean, it was too much. I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh my God. And I was sobbing. And I remember calling my agent. I was like, I don't want to do Deadline Crime anymore. I can't. And so Jordan is alive and well, and she helps me kind of, it's like an exorcism. And I know that these things won't go away. And I don't want to forget the single name of a single human being whose story I've ever told. But that comes with a price. And Jordan helps me with that.
It does. I'm often asked in interviews myself, how do I do true crime cases and sleep at night? And what is my process for that? And I says, well, depending on the case, I know I'm doing that case that week. I got to sit in with all the research I've done, but I've got to prepare myself for what I'm talking about. And if you ever listen to my show, I try to present the case without all the horrificness, but I'm proving the point, right? So I don't have to necessarily go and talk about all the blood and gore for you to understand what I'm saying. But I agree with you. My partner, LaDonna Humphrey, is the same way. She's been researching and investigating a case for 8 years, Melissa Witt. And then she ended up dealing with the whole death fetish community. And that messed her up. So everything that we do in true crime, I want people to appreciate that, because it does absolutely come with the price. These cases that we've seen and that you've seen and you've dealt with and on your TV shows, it stick with us for life. And it's triggering.
Yeah, I tell people, you're not supposed to, if you're a good human, and I think most people are good humans, right? You're not supposed to be able to stand in front of a crime scene and go home and just eat your ice cream and forget that happened. You're not designed. And that's why, when sometimes I watch the local news, and I'm a journalist to my core, but I have the same frustrations that people have when you watch the local news. It can make you feel like you can't walk outside your door, and so balancing that responsibility of scaring the hell out of people, but also telling these real life stories. And with Jordan, we're able to see some of what you've experienced, some of what I experienced, because it's not just me, obviously. And I use stories that I've heard and that I've had discussions with other reporters and incorporate them into this world that Jordan Manning lives in. But truly, it is, it's an interesting thing. I remember, David, it's around 10 years ago, I had a hard rule on no autopsy photos. Like like you, I get a big research packet. And when I did Deadline Crime, I was at MSNBC, and I would leave MSNBC on a Thursday or Friday, and then I'd hit the road to cover whatever cases I was doing the weekend. They give me a big binder. And I was in Columbia, Missouri. And I'm in this hotel room all by myself, and I have all these rules. My room cannot be near the stairwell. I have all these things that I've learned from being a crime reporter. I'm like, you will not be getting me near a stairwell. Thank you very much. But often I was traveling by myself. So I got in the room. My ritual was just like I needed to have a glass of wine, and I needed like a burger. I'm a burger person. It's like I just needed that comfort, right? And I open it up, read, turn page, and all of a sudden I said, wait a minute, what is that? And it's a laminated picture, and there's a little, like a sticky note or a little markings on this crime scene. And all of a sudden I realized I'm looking at the body on the ground, and this was a police photo, and I freaked out. I'm by myself, far from home. This poor child's body is on this photo. I was spiraling. I wanted to go home. Honestly, I was like, I don't need to do this. I wanted to go home. I ended up staying, obviously, because the young man's mother had agreed to talk with me, and she just had a lot of so many questions and such pain and so many unanswered things. And that's what kept me going, because she deserved the opportunity to speak, and she deserved the opportunity to remember him as a loving human being, the human being that she brought into this world, and through evil, someone else decided that his life should end. So to your point, I'm not into the gore, but it is fascinating, whether it's from the judicial point of view, or the humanity point of view, or lack thereof in some of these cases.
Well, you are a very smooth writer. I read a ton of books doing what I do, and you have a way of writing that you draw people in and you release when you should. So you like bring them into it, but then you have this smooth way of releasing them out of it and then bring them back in again. What is your writing process?
I am a morning person. I've been in morning TV for 30 years. So I have awakened at dark 30 my entire life. In fact, when I was pregnant, I still woke up every morning around 5 a.m. So my son, he's 5, has never slept past probably 7 o'clock, 6:30, 6:45. His little body is like that. My mother says it's a curse of me waking up so early. No, I wake up very early. I wrote As the Wicked Watch, as I shared with you already during the pandemic. We have like a small cottage on Long Island. And I felt very writery, like cute stereotype of a writer. I'm surrounded by tall pine trees with my mug in my hand, and I'm the crisp morning air, and I'm there sipping away. I use a voice recorder to write the stories, very similar to what I do with my show. I'm a fluid thinker, in case you can't tell from this conversation. My thoughts all kind of run together. So I would, just script it out, and I'd write the dialogue out loud. I'm there. I've got my phone, and and Jordan is saying this to Shelley, and the smell and the texture and, the sign. What does that sign look like? So Jordan is now in Indiana and she's exiting. And what does that look like? And the change in the topography from Chicago to Indiana. What does that smell like? What are the trees? And then I start to Google like vegetation. I love gardening. So I started Googling the vegetation and what does it look like at that time? And, if Shelley is, in the horse community, what do her hands look like? And I start Googling people's hands, and I try to find the description of even like my grandfather, who was a pit master. And I remember vividly every time I would go visit him with my mom, I noticed his hands, the leathery texture of his hands, because he touched the heat so long and pulling that, that hot barbecue off an open fire. So hands mean a lot to me. So the description of the hands, I try not to describe people just by race, tall, thin, waif, white, blonde, it's like, no. I mean, what did their breath smell like? What is the wiriness of the hair and all of that, and I just start to say it into the voice recording device that I have on my phone. Sean Taylor is a wonderful collaborator with me, then takes all of my words, poor thing, and she has to type all of this out. And then once it's on paper, we get together, and then she helps me edit down the copy and all of those things. And that's kind of how it's done. This book, Watch Where They Hide, was done in the city. A different level of impact on my mind because it is a noisy city. So I felt like this book was a lot, as I said, the first was a slow burn, but I was in the city writing this where everything is intense. So I think there's a level of intensity that you see in this. And it was probably because I'm in the heart of Manhattan, and the sound, even now I can hear the garage across the street where this car is coming out. And then there's a construction scaffolding right, a few inches from this window that I'm looking out right now. So there's an intensity that can inspire where you are and the writing that you then produce.
Well, you definitely feel it. You captured it. I used to live in Lafayette, Indiana, which is known as College Town for a long time. A lot of farmers was out there, a lot of rugged hands. So when you start describing her hands, because she was dealing with horse, I'm like, yeah, this is spot on. You always think you sitting right there.
Yeah, I love it. I had, I'm not sure, I'm sure you probably were the same way. I've always had a very vivid imagination. I was a daydreamer as a kid. In school, my teachers would say, I daydreamed and I talked at inappropriate times. And thus I'm a writer and a talk show host. So it's kind of like the two things that I was given poor marks for have allowed me to have a pretty decent life.
Well, after all of this, your wonderful career, now your books, I know you get ready to be busy because I do know that you're getting ready to go on book tours and to promote.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, besides all of that, what is next for Tamron Hall?
Well, I am first of all, this whole tour thing is a big deal because, I wrote the first book, it was the pandemic. So I didn't get a chance to, that image of you sitting and writing a book. And I didn't have that moment to sit and have these fireside chats with the book. So I'm very much looking forward to meeting different book clubs. My fantasy is to pop in on a few of them right in the middle of their living rooms and all that. So I love the idea of meeting for the book tours and having that engagement. And what's next? I'm starting the third in this series already. I'm trying to figure out the pacing. To your point, there's a number of years between the first and the second. I want people to be able to sit in this book and then be ready and excited about the next one. But I already know the case that has inspired the next one, and started to take like mental notes. To your point, my creative process has started. I started taking voice dictations because now I will forget. So I used to be like, oh, I can remember nope, I need to, as I go. The talk show is doing fantastic. We are in our 5th season, and we wrap this season up in May, and we start back, I'm sure, in September. So we're working on that schedule. I just announced a cookbook that I'm very excited about. It comes out next fall. And just looking for ways to storytell and ways to enjoy this journey and this fortunate life that I have to be able to talk with people like yourself and people who enjoy creating and enjoy those who create.
Well, Tamron, in closing, is there anything you would like to say to your fans and readers out there that may be listening today?
Oh my gosh. I really am so proud of this book and the support for many reasons. But I'll tell you, when I created this character, I was in the room with a couple of publishers, all very supportive. I got to tell you, we pitched this, and every publisher we pitched it to offered a deal. But I was told that there is not a character like Jordan Manning, meaning a Black female crime solver written by a Black female. Jordan is up for any case. She doesn't see, like most reporters, you don't go into the newsroom and say, I only want to cover the case of people who look like me, or I only want to do this case because it sounds like something you are assigned what you are assigned. And Jordan is such an interesting character. And because she does not, or, the publishing world has not seen a force like her, I want this book to win because it's good and I'm proud of it. And David said it's good. But I also want, like so much of my career, for it to disrupt what we think of the market, what we think of TV. My talk show disrupted the notion that a journalist, couldn't do this. And so many of us are disruptors in our daily lives. And I hope that this book, through its success, through y'all supporting this book, will disrupt the notion of what characters we want to read, look, and feel like.
Well, Tamron, let me tell you, first of all, I don't see why this book will not be a bestseller. So I'm going to congratulate you ahead of time. I know that's going to happen. Just to let you know that I'm seeing you face to face through a screen. You've been one of my big heroes. I followed your career for a number of years. We're very close in age. They always say, you don't want to meet your heroes. That does not apply to you. You've been very graceful. And I thank you for being on the show. These books, when you retire from TV, here you go. You could have got rid of all the TV stuff and just wrote books. I mean, this is excellent. So again, thank you for coming on the show. If you ever want to come back on the show, write a book, Extraordinary Person, you have more to your life, please feel free to have your PR team reach out. I would love to have you back on the show at any time.
You got a deal. You got a deal. Thank you. And give your wife my best. I really appreciate her supporting and getting you that book. Thank you.
I certainly will. Thanks, Tamron. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, that was the incredible Tamron Hall. You can pre-order your copy of Watch Where They Hide right now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and anywhere books are sold. Release date is March 12th, 2024. And while you are there, grab a copy of the bestseller As the Wicked Watch. You can read it while you wait for Watch Where They Hide. Links for both will be in the show notes. All right, just keep you updated where I'm going. Contractually, I will be at True Crime Fest in Fayetteville, Arkansas. August 2nd and 3rd, 2024. And then I will be at CrimeCon UK representing my other podcast, Extinguished, that I do with the great LaDonna Humphrey, September 21st and 22nd of 2024. The links to get your tickets for both are in the show notes. Once again, a huge thanks to Tamron Hall for being here today. And thank you for joining us. I know you have many choices in true crime and interview podcasts. I am grateful that for the last 2.5 years, you have chosen me. So be good to yourself and each other. And always remember, always stay humbled. An act of kindness can make someone's day. A little love and compassion can go a long way. And remember that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. I'll catch you guys on the next one.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. One link to the link tree has it all. Feel free to drop us a line at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Arslan. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild and David McClam. Theme music, Legendary by New Alchemist. Introduction and ending credits by Jackie Voice. See you next time on True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People.